This panel, Dean Maverick, right? How's that asking to be knocked down? Bringing the entrepreneurial mindset to the academic world. And we have truly a man who needs no introduction to this crowd, Aaron Dworkin, along with Susan Fader from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, Ron Himes from the Black Repertory Company, and Lee Kuntz, who is a New York-based arts administrator and from the Gateways Music Festival. So let's give them a really warm welcome to get all four of them out on stage.
The 5 B's. Be brief, brother, be brief. So I will endeavor to do so. But already I had to add something because of something that recently happened. And so I just wanted to share with you about 10 years ago. I was receiving the National Governor's Awards for service to state government. So I found myself in a car service from the train station in Des Moines, Iowa, heading to this big lockdown area in the center of Des Moines where all the nation's governors were to receive this award. And the driver turned in, and as we were going past these cordons, so they had streets cordoned off, and he was just like, oh yeah, there's governors and their staffs and so on and so forth. And he said, so are you the entertainment? And 5 years ago, at the Marriott Hotel here in Detroit, found myself in an elevator with Sanford Allen, riding up. Sanford Allen was the first African-American member of the New York Philharmonic and one of the first African-American members of a major American orchestra. Illustrious, incredible career musician, arts leader. And we were going up, and this gentleman came into the elevator, and he looked over and he saw Sanford's case, his violin, and he said, so are you a jazz musician? And Sanford looked at me, he's like, something like that. Yesterday, Af and I were riding up in the elevator in this hotel. And a wonderful gentleman, white gentleman, his wife and their kids got into the elevator, and they were like, so what's going on? You know, there's a bunch of people, and we're like, there's kind of, you know, it's a, you know, people are getting together, convening on inclusion in the performing arts. And he said, and I wrote it into my phone because it was so impactful, he said, oh, when I saw your people, I knew it wasn't something technical. And then he followed up and he said, and this was very well-meaning, his kids were there, there was no ill intent in his comments. Afa was kind of just a little bit stunned in the elevator. And then he followed it up and he said, yeah, everyone seemed really arts and craftsy. So I just want all of you to know that you guys look very arts and craftsy to others. So with that, and as I was thinking, what I came away with was the fact that if there were to be any time someone would come to me and say, is there really a need for a SphinxCon, for the work that Sphinx to be doing to continue and to have these types of incredibly important conversations? I think it is. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my last 7 months as I transitioned to the University of Michigan's School of Music, Theater, and Dance and bringing the entrepreneurial mindset to the academic world. And I'm going to roll through these areas relatively quickly because in many ways, these are kind of just pragmatic. A lot of them are logistical. And really, I wanted to kind of just provide a foundation for the types of things that I've been doing. And the areas in which I felt that I could begin to help make a difference at Michigan. And one of the other things is a lot of people over the past 7 months have said, oh, well, you know, how are you doing at Michigan? And have you gotten used to the academic environment? Have you gotten used to Michigan? And my response is always, Michigan's getting used to me. And I don't mean that from a standpoint of ego. I mean it from the standpoint that anytime I believe personnel change in an institution, it changes the institution. At Sphinx, we always had a thing. Anytime a new staff member came on board, the entire team is welcomed to the new team, not just the new person, because the team changes, when one person changes. And so I do believe that SMTD and the University of Michigan is a different school, not just with my arrival, but with others as well. So these are the areas I'm going to go through: physical environment, structure, hiring, workplace culture, entrepreneurship, my first semester, which just recently completed, and a leadership mindset. So again, I'll go through these relatively quickly. So with the physical environment, as I walked into a school of music, theater, and dance, my sense is that the physical environment needs to be creative, needs to reflect what it is that we do. So whether it's new art that we've been putting on our walls, whether it is new facilities, which I was very lucky to have the timing of my arrival with a brand new Brem Pavilion that we opened with incredible new facilities, whether it is my office specifically. I happen to always feel like I need to move, so I don't have a regular desk in my office. I have a treadmill desk. And also the conference table with which I meet with the senior team. We're in the process now of getting, basically, if you will, an elevator desk so we can have standing meetings, because I'm not a proponent of long meetings. And it's not just the desk that I have, but I wanted to make sure that in my office alone, you have the ability to have familial conversations. And so we have a conference table where people can put laptops and do various work like that. When there isn't that necessity, we have more, if you will, comfortable kind of armchairs to facilitate conversations. And it is those chairs that I usually almost always have my conversations with students. And then boards. So we wanted to put boards on the walls. So right outside of my office, I got all of the magnetic tiles for letters and words and to make poetry and things like that, because I wanted especially students to have the opportunity to send messages if they would like, and leave messages to the dean. And every day I'm surprised by what I see on the board as I walk into my office. So physical environment, I think, is very important. Structure, I think, is also important. I'm going to cover just a couple of different areas here where I wanted to be able to ensure that the infrastructure of the school could deliver. And one of the very first things was a chief administrative officer. I do not believe that we can realize full creative vision if you do not have the underlying financial and administrative structure of an institution in place. And so whether it's whatever you'd call or term that title, in this particular case it was a chief administrative officer, we went about making sure that that stable foundation was there at the school. Also, working groups. So I believe very strongly, I talk about this a little later, but about faculty governance. And so when we look at any particular type of project that we wanted to do, I never want to just have discussions. So we assemble a working group which has a particular discussion, but there is absolutely an action that they are then bringing back to my office, something that is going to happen as a result of their work. And so a number of the things that I'm going to talk about in the first 6 months were the results, not of my work, but of these working groups and the decisions that they reached. Part of that structure as well is we have our associate deans at the school. And these are 3 areas that I felt were critically important to the school, if you will, separate from kind of core academic work, and that is programs, the productions that take place, and partnerships. And we've always had kind of a structure for productions, as well as programs in a way, but I wanted to be able to have a singular area and an associate dean who could be responsible for all 3 of these areas and be able to have the time and the resources to be able to focus. And especially the newest was partnerships. I believe very strongly that the School of Music, Theater, and Dance cannot do our best work alone or in a vacuum. And whether those are internal partnerships with the rest of the University of Michigan and other units, or whether it is with all of our wonderful colleagues and other organizations, not only in Detroit and Ann Arbor, but also around the country as well. So, and then finally, inclusion, of course, is a key area. And I wanted to look at and see how can we best tackle inclusion and have an infrastructure, again, to address that. And so we integrated inclusion into the existing structure. So we have an associate dean for graduate studies and inclusion. And we identified an operational structure, so we created the position of Director of Inclusion that could actually do the operational work to put the various initiatives that we have in place. When it gets to some of those issues like hiring, and I'll go through these kind of pretty quickly, but position descriptions, going beyond the standard post, not settling, and talk about this for a little bit, that in everything that we do, the position descriptions, going beyond the standard post, everything, we don't just put the wording at the bottom of the EEOC standard wording for inclusive hiring. But as we look to describe the position, we wouldn't necessarily say something like needs to work with others on financial matters, but needs to be able to communicate in a dynamic, diverse environment with those with varying views, or those types of things, so that as someone reads it, they realize this is an environment I'll be entering where I will need to interact in an inclusive way. We hire again, hiring teams, search committees, and I give them a charge to be courageous in the work that they do and to not settle. There is nothing more expensive, I believe, to an institution than hiring the wrong person. And I'll give an example of that because I think in many ways this predated my arrival with my own search committee that selected me. The University of Michigan and the School of Music, Theater, and Dance assembled what to me at the time I saw, especially compared to any other institution, was a very atypical search committee. And I think if its membership was not atypical, and I think if they were not acutely in tune with the direction of the school, my candidacy certainly would not have been successful. Workplace culture, I'll go through these. These are pretty quickly and kind of self-explanatory, but I believe very strongly in timeliness. I think if you are not on time, it is disrespectful for those with whom you are meeting. And a lot of times I see people approach timeliness based on hierarchy of position and or faculty to student or faculty to staff, those types of things. And from my perspective, I don't think that should be tolerated. I think often meetings are way too long and it takes up time. For me, any minute in a meeting that is unnecessary is time that a faculty member isn't spent doing their core academic work or their research or their teaching. And that the conversations we have should be meaningful. They should be fierce. Talked about that last year. Pre-messaging meeting I'll talk about in just a second, but flexibility, accounting, new goals, and attire. I think that a lot of times people dress in a way they just don't want to dress. So this is how I dress on a regular day. The only time I change my dress is for donors. And I do it because if I believe that a donor's understanding or representation of the school will be affected by how I appear to them, then I will alter my attire to be able to make sure that I'm representing the school in the best way to them. But separate from that, in all of our internal and external conversations, me with the president of the university, I dress in jeans, and I asked during my candidacy if this was going to be okay. I didn't want to be, have it end very quickly. And pre-meeting messaging. This was one key thing that I just wanted to share, which is that as it relates to all of these things, you can like them and think about them, but it's different to put it into practice. And so upon my arrival at the school, I sent out a message to everyone at the school that if you want to meet with the dean, here are things that you have to do. You have to provide these very basics. What is it you want to talk about? Who have you talked about it with? What's the goals of your meeting? If there are requests, what are those requests, et cetera? Things that are very basic, and there was some pushback to this. But I would share that 95% of my meetings have been incredibly efficient and productive. Entrepreneurship, these are just very, very quick, and Mark was able to touch on this earlier, but we launched our Excel program, which involves faculty leadership, operational capacity, but everything centering around entrepreneurship, career empowerment, and leadership at the school. And so in my first semester, we developed a vision for the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. We developed our Michigan Artist Citizen program, which is an evolution of our El Sistema program. We've launched a partnership with Center Stage Strings, one of the leading summer music programs, which now is based at our school. We opened, as I mentioned, our Brem Pavilion. We opened and launched a department of chamber music and are just now in the process of identifying the new chair of that department. We launched Emprise, which is basically structured to be the largest and most prestigious chamber music competition in the world with a $100,000 grand prize and divisions in strings, winds, as well as an open division, which is any instrumentation of 3 to 8 musicians. We're in the midst of faculty searches, 2 chair searches. We launched the capacity for videography at the school. I launched a program because I wanted to be able to provide students with the opportunity to interact on a regular basis with the leadership of the school. So we have our dean's liaisons who do that throughout the year. Our partnerships, as I mentioned, we're very proud that Chairman of the NEA, Jane Chu, will be coming to be our commencement speaker, and as I mentioned, the Excel program. So that is in the first 6 months, and I wanted to leave you with just a couple of these thoughts about leadership, mindset. And one of them is that I came in and I questioned pretty much everything. A number of the people at the school might be a little tired of me asking questions, but I do ask them because I think you have to. And you have to ask why. Well, this is what we do. Why? Well, it's just what's always worked. Why? I ask a lot of why. Faculty governance, this is one of the most important things. A lot of people believe and told me faculty governance means things must move slower. You cannot do what you want to do in the time frame that you are sharing with me because we must have faculty involved. I am one of the deepest, not just proponents, but advocates for faculty governance, and I guarantee you it does not have to equal inertia. But you have to put those various systems in place to be able to do that. Calculated risks, you have to take risks if you're going to be innovative. And finally, failure. We cannot fear failure. And I cannot tell you how often I encounter people, and often it's interesting because it's more often people in leadership positions that I find are far more fearful of failure than others. And it's probably because they have more they feel to lose. And entrepreneurs aren't worried about failure because they're often not climbing a particular ladder that's prescribed. They're not really worried about their next job. An entrepreneur is focused on the job at hand. That's what they're driven to make successful. But oftentimes, if you get into systems in the corporate world, in the academic world, in the organizational world, you can often not be worried less about the current job than you are about the next job. I'm, I guess, lucky in that I have nowhere else I want to go other than the University of Michigan, and so it is just all I care about, which is the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. So wanted to kind of just start with these areas and delve into some of our questions.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I think, Susan, let me start with you. You've followed Aaron's work and been involved with Aaron's work for a long time. A lot of that work is about getting someone like Aaron into the position that Aaron is in now. How are we going to know that he's successful? In 5 years, what do you think Dean Maverick is going to be able to change? In 10 years? I don't know the right time frame. What are the hopes and goals that we are imbuing Aaron with?
Yeah. I don't think we can imagine what Aaron is going to have accomplished in 5 years, given the how fast you've come off of the starting line here. So I think that success for you will continue to look like the kind of level of change that is responsive to a rapidly changing environment, and finding the kinds of students that are attracted to Michigan that might not have been otherwise, and the kind of faculty that is sharing your vision.
That's great. Lee, you've worked in a lot of organizations. You've seen lots of administration. You've worked with musicians in a variety of capacities. In listening to Aaron, what are the things that are sort of most transferable that would work anywhere? What are the things that are sort of specific to Aaron? What are the lessons, the takeaways that we should take from the 7 things that Aaron just outlined?
Well, certainly, well, first let me say congratulations, Aaron. The fact that you're in this position, I think, is extraordinary. And the fact that there are now 2 deans of African descent at major conservatories, music schools in this country is really revolutionary. So congratulations. I think there's a boldness in what you're doing, Aaron, because you're walking the talk. So you hear a lot of organizations talk about many of the things that short meetings, pre-meetings, this whole faculty inertia, it's not, doesn't have to go together, but you are making these things happen, not just talking about them. And I think that is what is the most important.
That's great. Ron, we're counting on Aaron to turn out next generations of artists. We're counting on him to send out the artists who can succeed in the world, who can make great art, who can take the risks. What kind of students do you want Aaron to be turning out? Who is it you hope he will be graduating?
I think that, well, certainly that it would be a very, very diverse class of students, and students who have a wide range of interest, who are creative, who are fearless, and who are change agents. I think that from the platform that he has laid, that the students that he should be turning out, or hopefully will turn out, will be students who will follow in his footsteps of continuing to change society.
I think that's great. I'm going to ask each of you to think about a question that you have for Aaron. I want to sort of mix it up here a little bit and ask you guys to do that. And after we get through their questions, we're going to come right out to you guys, because I think more than any session, this is a session that we want to get the room's voice into. So thinking about Aaron, thinking about the presentation, Susan, what is it you want him to speak to? What would you like him to?
I'd like to know what the biggest surprise has been for you in making this change to academic life, and how have you dealt with that surprise?
It's interesting, actually, because when you found an organization, if you will, you just, at least for me at Sphinx, I loved everything about my job. I don't ever feel like I've had a job. I don't feel like I have a job now. I just don't feel like I work. And I had resigned myself to the idea that that couldn't be true in this new role. There were things that I just couldn't expect, anticipate, that would have to be part of this new role that I just wouldn't really like as much, but that were part of this greater whole and broad impact and difference that I could make. And so that was more than an easy price to pay for what I wanted to be able to do. And it just has not been the case. It really hasn't. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, maybe he's just saying that, he's making it sound all nice and vanilla or whatever. But not that it's all easy, far from that. But that whether it's a detailed, budget issue, or whether, there's a student issue or contention with faculty, or, any of these things that might otherwise, to me, they're not unpleasant. And I feel like I'm able to participate and make a difference. And so I just absolutely love every aspect of what I'm doing. And in some ways, that's the biggest surprise. And maybe the only other is that I thought to some things there would be greater pushback than there actually has been. And ironically, one of the areas that I didn't anticipate that much pushback was one of the very first area of pushbacks. The very first area of pushback I got was on day one. I had the email went out of, kind of here's how to prepare for a meeting with the dean, or these things to ask for, and then when you actually come, here's the way, kind of the ways to prepare for a meeting. And that must have gone out at maybe 9:30, I think, in the morning or something like that. And at about maybe 3:30 or 4 o'clock that afternoon, I heard from a colleague on the East Coast saying, so I hear you're really putting demands on your faculty in terms of being able to manage. It's just like, what has happened here? So there was a little bit of, but I think it was pushback against the new and the unknown, because then when people actually realize, I think, and I hope, and at least the feedback I've gotten over time, is that there's actually an appreciation, because there's clarity on here's why I'm meeting, and then there's clarity on when I leave a meeting, I have clarity about what it is that I went in there for. Whether it's positive or not, there is clarity and a shared sense of expectations and understanding. So that's been great.
That's great. Ron, what's on your mind?
After your sort of honeymoon is over, and you have continued to be subversive and disruptive, how will you answer why?
Ooh, great question. I'm hoping the honeymoon doesn't end.
Oh, that's sweet.
Just like marriage.
Right, exactly, yes. So, and in that way, my honeymoon truly has not ended in my marriage. So hopefully all will be the same. But I am the only thing that matters to me is making a difference. And so if there is kind of increased pushback or reticence about certain things, if through a diligent process of faculty discussions and staff leadership involvement, there is something that I am absolutely convinced is in the best interests of our students or our faculty or the school, I just simply will not rest until we do it. And I'm not, I guess, worried about the personal perception consequences or things like that. Michigan is a place with tenure, and I feel the wonderful security of a tenured faculty I always joke about. And so it's just not, I guess somehow, and maybe it was through the transition and looking at the work that Sphinx is continuing to do, which is a testament to the unbelievable team there, that the only thing that matters to me is making a difference. It's the only thing that in the end of the day as I fall asleep matters. There are so many things that we can't affect, health issues that us or loved ones face and things like that, and that's what's always in my mind. And there are so many things that are so peripheral or seem so minuscule in contrast to those types of things. So I just think about our students. I'm always thinking about our seniors especially, and I'm thinking about if I take 3 years to do this, our juniors and seniors currently, none of those students, I have to look at them in the face and shake their hand when they walk across the stage and leave us and go, I did my best to prepare you, not just to be able to do okay, but to succeed and excel in what it is that you came here for, from me and from our faculty and our staff. I just feel incredibly driven to deliver for our students on that. And so if the honeymoon ends and all of these things, the why is our students.
It's amazing. Lee?
Wow. Aaron, such great questions have already been asked. You are a graduate of University of Michigan, right? And so you went to school there and you had a certain experience and you came out. How does that experience compare to the experience that the students who are current students at University of Michigan, how does that experience compare, and how will those students be different based on your leadership? And after you've put all of the things you've talked about and many other things, I'm sure, in place, in 5 years, what will be different about a graduate from the University of Michigan than from 20 years ago or 10 years ago?
Yeah, wow, great question. And so I did, and you know, I mean, the University of Michigan, the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, you know, built my life. I was a student when I founded Sphinx. And so in many ways, the first thing that I would say is that my number one job is to not screw things up. In that I am joining and have a responsibility that I'm joining an amazing institution that already excels in so many areas. So first kind of, you know, Hippocratic, do no harm. So that is forefront. And so one of the things I want to do is make sure we continue to do that and then be additive to that. One of the things is that I think my opportunities that I had at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, in many ways at the time I was an outlier. And so when I decided to be cross-disciplinary and join with choreographers and dancers and do music by composers of color and perform recitals along that way, that was kind of external. I kind of had to get special permission to do. It is my hope that we can really create a foundation where you don't have to be an outlier student to do these types of cross-disciplinary things. When I talk to the professionals in the field, just even Delroy last night was talking about how what seems most important is that students have the opportunity to interact with other disciplines. So there's that aspect. Entrepreneurship, the same thing, that it's part of the standard fare. My hope is that it will eventually be a requirement on the part of all of our students, that they, in certain ways, have these skill sets as a core part of their training and education that they get at our school. Inclusiveness, of course, I want the School of Music, Theater, and Dance to be more inclusive. And that's across the board. So that's students, staff, faculty, of course, but it's also what we teach. What is the curriculum we're teaching, and how are we teaching it? Are there things that are relevant to our field that we are not teaching? So part of the early thing when I did a listening tour and talked with all of the chairs, leadership at the school, we developed a vision, which is to become the most relevant performing arts school in the world. And in that, we're training and educating our students to be relevant to their fields of study, and we're empowering our faculty and students to have those fields of study be relevant to society. And to be relevant, we have to be inclusive in all of these ways. One of the things I'm very proud about with inclusion, in part because of this, the tremendous work being done by our Associate Dean for Inclusion, our Director of Inclusion, as well as admissions, and it really goes across the board to the entire school already, along with the supportive measures being taken at central administration. But we have not obviously made decisions on acceptances yet, but for our incoming applications, which we've just closed for this year, we've experienced a 35% increase in underrepresented minorities for the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. So we are beginning to see something that it is a process.
That's great. Let's go right to the audience, please.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Amanda Kemp, and I'm the founder of Theater for Transformation, a small independent theater company, and I graduated from Northwestern University. And so my question is this. I wonder how you can use the resources to support smaller, innovative, maybe organizations that within their first 10 or 15 years of maturation to do the work that they do in communities. And then the second thing is, what is there, so in the theater world, there's this whole conversation about where do people go after they graduate, you know, with these dreams and skills, because the jobs are limited. And so people tend to create organizations, but then creating organizations often is a different skill set, or it just takes a whole lot of energy that's not directly associated with furthering the art that you went to school to create. So I wonder about, and especially with students who have a desire for social justice, who want to use art to change the world, who want to use art to advance equity. What can be done? As you see them walk across the stage with that kind of fire and commitment, what can you do to support them so that they can succeed?
Yeah. Great questions, and thank you so much for your comments. And of course, Northwestern is where the other African-American dean is, and while it is great in a few ways, we doubled the representation. We've got a long way to go. So in many ways, I wish I wasn't, the second, or in the case of Michigan, the first African-American dean at the school. It's interesting, the independent organizations, that's a tougher question to answer because our focus needs to be on our students. So I'll put it in just in terms of that focus area. And that really relates to our Excel program, which is why we launched this and have put so much time and effort and resources into it, and which Mark is just being extraordinary in terms of leading those efforts. And that is that this is the area where our students can understand what is going on in the field, understand what jobs are out there, how can they position them for them, as well as if they feel those jobs aren't the best fit for them, how can they create the job they would actually like to have? So we're deeply invested in that, and that goes in a host of ways. So there's entrepreneurship courses, curriculum, there's workshops where we bring in practicing professionals from the field today so that students can actually go, what is the real world like? What are you doing? But arguably the most important area, which is I think relates to your question, is basically, if you will, our accelerator grants through our Excel program. And these are direct grants to students so that they can launch their own entrepreneurial endeavors, whether that be their own 501c3, whether that be their own chamber music ensemble, whether it be a recording project, whatever that might be. And the trajectory that we're on already, it is our expectation that by the fall, so fall of 16, we will be able to provide more direct entrepreneurial grant support to students than any other performing arts school in the country.
That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Awesome. And you have Ron Heim sitting up there representing this incredible institution, right? And I just wonder, how can we leverage big institutions to support institutions like that, which Mr. Rhimes represents?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you very much. Right behind you.
Hi, Victor Sawyer from the Memphis Music Initiative. Good afternoon.
Great Memphis contingent here.
Yeah. You mentioned a slew of new procedures and systems that you mentioned pushback from some of your the faculty members and students possibly. I'm wondering, as you're forming new organizations and introducing new procedures and systems, what challenges and obstacles do you encounter when you're in an artistic environment? There's artists tend to shy away from systems and rules and procedures because they believe it'll stifle them. And I'm wondering, what sort of challenges have you encountered as you introduce different systems that are actually designed to maximize the benefits of their creativity?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it's actually interesting because if you will, kind of in the private sector and in nonprofit organizations, I found exactly that we don't want systems, we just want to do. But I find a lot in the academic environment, a lot of people seem to like committees and spending time and gathering and talking through things to a great extent. And I think that there's a couple of reasons for that. And I've tried to kind of find a balance. When we do something at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance, we want it to be sustainable. And so the idea of doing that, to have something be sustainable, I believe, in an academic environment, you can't just have a singular source of inflection, of motivation for it. It won't be sustainable. So any of these initiatives that I mentioned, if there wasn't some other people at the School of Music, Theater, and Dance really leading these efforts and areas, they would not be sustainable. I, as dean, could not sustain them. There needs to be that type of investment across the institution, especially when it comes to inclusion. And so I find that there is a mix of reticence or hesitation or pushback for doing things too quickly without structure. And then amongst students, I find an impatience with not being able to do things and why can't we, and that there is too much structure. So I try and find the balance where, to me, we have to have the rigor and the integrity to make sure that whatever it is we're building is sustainable, but then we should be no holds barred to actually make it happen once we have that.
That's great. Can I take advantage of having the four of you on stage? Am I correct in assuming you've all read the DeVos report about culturally specific organizations? It's been brought up a couple of times. We haven't really talked about it. The headlines for anyone who hasn't read it is that the support for culturally specific organizations in this country is very different than the support for other organizations in this country. And the report said that maybe we don't have enough philanthropic resources to support the number of organizations we have. We need fewer, right? Philanthropy needs to pick winners and losers. I don't want to ask a question. I just want reactions.
Well, my reaction to it is that I think that it is acceptable that that the pool is limited. I think that as we look at how we are going to address the number of organizations that have been underserved, underfunded, that we have to begin to look at cutting the pie differently, and that resources have to be shifted. I've had conversations with major institutions in St. Louis where also I've talked about it in many instances, larger institutions can adopt and support small and mid-sized institutions without compromising their funding, their work, their mission, or anything at all.
Lee, Susan?
I applaud the DeVos report for drawing attention to this matter, but I think it was a highly flawed report that uses old thinking on a new problem. And by that I mean that to say that solutions are more ambitious programming, more marketing, and develop your individual donor base works in a certain kind of institution, but perhaps not in an institution that's either culturally explicit, community-based, or rural. And I think this is where this work is happening. I think to call them, I forget the terminology, but I don't think there was adequate acknowledgement of the fact that these institutions have existed for years and years and years on sweat equity and are doing vital and important work. So I couldn't agree more that the pie needs to be divided differently.
The other thing is that, I mean, there's been some talk about changing the language from nonprofit to whatever. The reality is that for small, culturally specific, and mid-sized organizations, the 501c3 model has never worked.
Right.
It has never worked for institutions of color. It has never worked for rural institutions. It has never worked for small and mid-sized institutions. And so until we can address that, which is where a lot of the problems lie in Michael's thinking, is that we can't shift that paradigm until some changes are made in that model.
Excellent. Lee?
What Ron and Susan just said.
Excellent. All right, we're going to take the three folks that are lined up at the mic. We're going to take the three folks who are lined up at the mic because someone used the time up top. Dean Timeliness.
I thought I was good.
Please join the conversation.
Thank you. I'm Charles Dickerson. I have a question for the Dean, and I want to join with everyone else in congratulating you and matriculating to the position that you have, to which you have arrived, and for the good work that you're doing. I could be serving under an incorrect impression, but one of the impressions I've had about you over the years, I haven't had the privilege of knowing you really very closely, but kind of the reputation that you have is that one of the reasons why Sphinx started is because you felt a certain sense of inability to fight against a system that seems to be in place and almost intractable, that has kept people like yourself and other people of color from moving beyond just a certain degree of getting into professional opportunities. That's the impression that I have. I could be wrong, and please correct me if I am. And we have, those of us who are kind of in positions where we hope to get other young people into professional opportunities, have also seen not just the orchestras, not just the dance companies, but the conservatories, the schools, as part of that system that has kept people like yourself and others, perhaps, from making it. Now you're in a position where you're basically the gatekeeper. At least that's the perception. I'd like you, and I know you're brand new in this job, I'd like you, if you could, to share with us how you see yourself now as, quote, the gatekeeper, and how that impacts on, ultimately, the pipeline, the issues that we've kind of talked about, and that we talk about consistently, and we have since you created this organization.
Great question. Thank you so much for it. And in general, yes, I would say that overarching drive with Sphinx was not just, if you will, the uplifting of a particular group, but the diversification of an art form that I loved and felt passionately about. And how does that happen? And that happens, of course, in large part by creating these gateways and pathways. And yes, as one of the students said to me, like, yeah, they're like, you're the man now. And so while it doesn't necessarily feel that way, there's that responsibility is there, and it is part of my daily thinking and work, and especially as it relates to pipeline into SMTD. That is a major thing that we're working on at the school, and actually, because there are some of our great leadership from the school here, and so I'm very much against standing meetings, because I think there should always be a specific purpose to a meeting. But there is one standing meeting that I am having weekly, and it is with our Assistant Dean for Admissions and Enrollment Management, because this issue is so critical. And we've made these great steps in terms of that we've had a dramatic increase, unprecedented in the school's history, related to applications. That doesn't mean anything, of course, unless it results in a matriculation. And there is where you get unbelievably complex, related to obviously financial aid, to artistic merit, related to all of the different academic standing and all the different issues that have to weigh into this. And the areas in which, as a school, we have flexibility, and areas where we don't have flexibility, and areas where we have to make very difficult decisions about what we want to evolve or not evolve as it relates to our admissions criteria. And so we're deeply involved in that, and I am deeply invested in that and feel a direct personal responsibility to try and deliver in exactly the area you've raised.
That's great. Please join us.
Such an excellent segue to my question or thought exercise. I'm Adriana with the National Association of Latino Arts and Cultures, and I also serve on the board of the Association of American Cultures, and we're actively recruiting board members. Just putting that out there. Not conference facilitator, agent, provocateur. So thank you for doing the mic drop, Jamie, when you were talking about how we ask what the language that we use when we're using admissions processes, grant writing applications, doing auditions. So I don't expect that we would have an answer now, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the panel, including you, Jamie, and audience members, like, how do we decolonize these gatekeeping exercises for admission? Are there ways in which we can be doing it better, differently, especially given the way that our culture has accelerated and there's different means for accessing information and exhibiting our strengths and our qualities as human beings and practitioners. So I'm wondering if there's ways in which we can improve the actual literal, exercise of that transaction.
That's great. I'm going to let that question sit with all of us, invite the last comment from the audience, and then we'll give everyone a chance to reflect on both. Please.
I have two comments. One is to you, Jamie. I would like for you to consider not referring to people as customers, but as citizens, because customer comes from the word consume, and to consume is to destroy. That's why you had consumption TB in the 1900s. And my other comment is that culture is not an institutional thing. Culture is a people thing. These institutions, the museums, the opera, the theater, those all arose from the people. Our culture will be here even if there is no museum, even if there is no opera, even if there is no symphony. People will make music. Culture belongs to the people, not to the institutions.
Thank you. So, two comments that in many ways do sort of reflect on each other. Are we going to live in a world where there are gates and we just need to change who the gatekeepers are? Or do we need to blow up that whole paradigm of the gate? And culture is of the people. What is the role of the institution vis-a-vis the people? These are two big thoughts, and you are four big minds. So I'm going to give Aaron the most time to think about it and start with Lee. and we'll just run
Boy,
down.
Those are huge, huge questions. I think we could be here the entire weekend just on those. I've heard several people this weekend talk about, is this the right mountain to climb, and should we be climbing another mountain? I think that there are many ways to achieve the goals that we're talking about achieving as it relates to inclusion, diversity, and equity. And I don't have answers for how we're going to get to those places, but I do think that there are many ways and that we've got to explore them. About culture, I couldn't agree with you more. I remember when I worked at the Chicago Symphony in community relations, and several people said to me, well, we're going to bring music to the South Side. What? We're going to... You got to be kidding me. So I think that it's just, some of you got what I just said, right?
Yeah. Did anyone not get what he just said?
Okay. Shocking to me. Shocking. So much of what we're talking about this weekend is related. The funding, and why does so much of the funding go to these huge, huge institutions and so little is going to community-based organizations? That's all related to this. How does an institution like University of Michigan tap into or become a part of, or how does that community become a part of you in a real, organic, systemic, authentic way? I think these are all the kinds of questions that we need to be asking, and I don't have all the answers, but I do think that they should be a part of the discussion.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I agree too with the statement about culture, because I think that the question about where do students go when they complete, and students come out of these arts programs to create art, and instead of being able to do that, they wind up trying to create institutions. And what we know is that institutions do not grow or sustain without philanthropy. And so I think that the root of what we're talking about in a lot of ways is looking at philanthropy in America, how it operates, how it will change how we are able to celebrate and preserve the many different cultures that are celebrated in this country and that make up this country. In terms of gates, I'm from St. Louis, and St. Louis is famous for its gated communities. Mm-hmm. And I think that in a lot of instances, those neighborhoods and those communities have gates to keep people out. And what they don't realize is in the process of keeping people out, they are also keeping out culture, they're keeping out exchange, they're keeping out growth, they're keeping out interaction with people that are different from them, art that is different from them. Mm-hmm. And so yes, when we look at gates, we have to find a way to, if not tear down the gates, but to make sure that the gates open both ways. Yes. One of the, with the symphony, I just have to say this because one of my biggest peeves in St. Louis is we have, of course, in February, the two big In Unison concerts are coming. And, you know, we've had a lot of conversation about the musicians on stage. But there are two performances in this classically black series. They're called different things in all these cities. And on the night of the classically black series, the audience will be 97% African American. And on every other night, it is 97% the other way. And I'm always wondering, have been asking the question for years, don't those people who regularly go to the symphony have any interest in the classically black symphony? I mean, classically black evening, the composers, the music by composers of African American descent. And is there not enough demand if we in fact know that we're selling out two performances to an African American community that is not usually in the building? Should we not figure out that we should be doing more of that?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Susan.
Thinking about the gatekeeper question and the admissions question, I think that educators going forward have an obligation to figure out how to identify high potential as opposed to high achieving students. And if anyone can do it, I think it is Dean Maverick. And to amend the question you asked me earlier in the hour, Jamie, about where I see Aaron in 5 years, maybe we're going to be looking at Not Dean Maverick, but President Maverick.
Definitely not true. It's the gatekeeping question is when I was in my role at Sphinx, I had the luxury of being able to freely chastise, for example, schools of music, schools of the performing arts. Because there is such a clear issue at stake and disparity. And I could offer ideas for solutions without the need to implement them. So now I have that weight from the earlier question, the responsibility to implement it. And so the reality is for the School of Music, Theater, and Dance that it really is complex, but we can do it. We're already doing it partially, but we got a lot of work to do. There are certain core things. So one is that we need to, of course, just increase awareness and the sense of being welcomed, and so that students will actually apply and understand the transformational things that we can do for them at the school. However, when we then have that pool needs to be qualified to enter the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. And this, I think, gets to exactly what Susan is saying, is what are the criteria that we set out? Is it test scores and past achievement? Is it measures that determine future achievement? How do we do that? And to me, there is great complexity and great opportunity for risk, but for integrity and for evolution of the way that we currently look at things. And I think that this is a core part of some of the things that we're working on at the school, is how do we determine that criteria. Separate from all of that is that we have a responsibility to be daily engaged with the communities from whom we want our students to come from. Yes. And we have to be doing work and investing work, and that means faculty, that means programming, that means research, it means money being expended to invest in the students whom at one point in the future we will curate as to whether we can invite them to be part of the School of Music, Theater, and Dance. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, we haven't touched on this, and I know we're out of time, but it's a whole area in and of itself, is that once we actually bring an amazing young student into our school, how successful are they going to be? Yeah. What are the surroundings? How are their peers going to treat them? How are their peers going to talk to them? Right? And all of the issues related to microaggressions and so on and so forth. And this is also part of what our inclusion work is about, is making sure that we not only are inviting and identifying and bringing all of the best students. And to me, for us to have the best incoming class, that class must be inclusive. Otherwise, it wasn't the best class we could have recruited. But then once they're with us, how successful are they? What are their graduation rates? And not only that, what are they doing after? And that's where, of course, our Excel program and other programs come into play. So it really is a complex issue, and one that we're deeply working on, and I think already making changes or creating some outcomes, because that's all that really matters for students. And my hope is that they will ultimately be successful when they're adjudicated, when I'm adjudicated in 5 years and we really see what happens. And hopefully they'll not only be successful, but then all of our peers will take that on as well and replicate our successes.
That's great. All right, I want 2 rounds of applause. I want 1 round of applause for this panel, which was a fabulous conversation. And I'd also like to ask for a round of applause for the founder of Sphinx, Aaron Moore.